Welcome. I'm Meredith, and this is the Oasis Spiritual Empowerment Tarot, all about tarot, oracle, and empowering you. And tonight, I'd like to do a review of the Edmund Dulac Tarot. Now, this is by request. R. Isaacs, this is for you. I'm sorry, it took a little time to do this, and I'll tell you why. So this deck, well, first I suppose I should say that this, well, it's a low Scarabeo deck. Who the heck? Okay. Giacomo Gialli created the deck, but of course the artwork is Edmund Dulac. Alright, so, I mean, look at the backs. They're absolutely gorgeous. Now, when it comes to using the deck, so, it took me a little while to film this because, first of all, I didn't use it a ton, and I wanted to give it a good amount of use before I did this. Now, part of that is, if you're new here, I've gotten quite a few decks since this one, and I've just tended to reach for other decks. So, basically, I made it a point to use this deck, and there is something I'll show you a bit later that made me use it actually much more. I'm not going to do a full flip. Well, maybe I will. We'll see. So here's the thing. First, it's a little bit smaller than a standard tarot deck. This is a deck that definitely would have been better served to be larger. Some of the artwork, some is easier to see, some less so. Personally, for me, the majors tend to be fine. I think they're pretty easy to read for the most part. They also, I think, sync up well with the majors. And of course they are numbered. They don't give you the titles though, which, you know, is fine. But I do feel that they convey the meanings of the cards pretty well. Now, when it comes to the minors, it can be a little bit different. So, I'll show you what I mean. This is lovely, and it's beautiful, okay? It's beautiful, beautiful artwork. Alright. So now as we get into the minors, I would say that okay, when for the first long while that I was using this deck, without really paying attention or noticing, what I tended to do is kind of pull in more numerology for the minors. Didn't really think about it. I think for me, the majors tend to be a lot more intuitive. I feel more with these. So it's less thinking and more feeling. I think with the minors, less like I don't really feel Ace of Pentacles or coins with this card. Now, I'm going to show you. This is the guidebook, right? It's really small. And it's kind of standard low scarabeo style. So if we look at the Ace of Coins, what it tells you, right, for this card: a woman teaches a boy how to play chess. A mysterious closed chest lies at their feet. Planning, giving, receiving support, prospects of wealth. So that's what you get for this card. So this tends not to be a card that, for me, I do a lot with in terms of the imagery. I just don't. And, you know, it's funny because I didn't really notice it wasn't until I started really considering this deck for the video that I realized what I was doing. So I read with this deck just fine, but I'm not diving deep into the artwork for some of them, not all, but for some of the minors. It just doesn't jive for me. But again, I really didn't even notice. There are some, like this one, I think fits really nicely. Then we have like this one, right? So for the Four of Coins, and this is like the Princess and the Pea, right? I think so. I mean, let's see what the guidebook says. Okay. So for the Four of Coins, we have a maiden rests in a canopy bed on a stack of mattresses. The search for maximum comfort and stability, taking care of one's belongings. I mean, to me, this is Princess and the Pea, which is not really it. To me, I have to do some mental acrobatics to kind of jive the two. Now, if I disregard that old story and just kind of look at it, maybe it fits in a bit more. Now this one I think is wonderful. We don't see any people, but you know, you kind of get that feeling of scarcity, right? Of maybe even you can have an idea of almost desperation, right? Of resources being limited. So it really depends on the card. Some are just more well suited than others. This is also a deck that, because the artwork is so detailed and it's fairly small, I tend not to like it with bigger spreads. So I've tried it with larger spreads. It just doesn't really, it doesn't feel as comfortable as I would like. It's not as easy to read as I would like. I tend to really like to take my time with these cards and focus on each card pretty well. So for that reason, you know, I've been doing primarily maybe 3 cards at a time, maybe 4. Because there's a lot here, There's a lot to go into. And it's not a deck. You know, there are some decks that I have where I, you know, as soon as I lay them out, the messages jump right out, right? This is not that deck. Not for me. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a thing, right? So that affects how I use it. I'm glad I have this deck, right? So don't get me wrong, I do like it. I do think that this is not a deck that I will probably use for others. Again, because I often have to take time. Not always, right? Some things jump right out. But not everything does. And I would say less than half of them jump out. Which again it's not like it's a bad thing exactly, but it's a thing. Now, let me show you what has really had me reaching for this deck more. And that is a perfect pairing with the wisdom of Hafiz. I love these decks together. Right, so these are the backs, just to give you. But more importantly, the fronts. This would have been better served if it was this size. Or even bigger, honestly. But I think they're lovely together. I just think they're lovely together. So having this deck, because they just feel so nice together, has made me use this one more. And sometimes that's what it takes, right? Now the interesting thing is to show you. One of the ways I've been using this deck with this one is I'll actually do, yeah, I know I shuffle upside down like constantly. But what I'll do is I'll do a spread with this, right? So let's see how much room we have. So I'll lay out the cards, and then what I'll do is I'll take maybe 2 cards to kind of tie in. Are we gonna fit? Mostly fitting. So I'll actually end up using more of the oracle cards than the tarot, which is unusual for me, but I kind of like it. It just kind of suits it. I like the oracle breaking up the tarot. It just makes it a little easier to read. And even like this card, right? I mean, there are details, but you don't necessarily need them. Okay? But it still feels like a lot to take in. And again, that it's not a bad thing, but it is a time thing. Why is this mat is going everywhere? So it just needs a little more time. And then with this deck, there's a lot to see here too, but it tends to evoke more in me, and it jumps out more. So it's just a little bit of a relief almost in reading. It makes it a little easier to read with. Yeah, but I think this is a beautiful deck. I mean, I really do. If they came out with this in a larger size, I would definitely buy it. The only thing I would say is you're probably going to want to use more than strictly the images for this deck. Or you might want to kind of go off from standard tarot meanings, and I think that's okay. But for me, I tend to pull in, I almost kind of read this like a Marseille deck, really. Now that said, I think I take the numbers as like a jumping off point, and I do look at the imagery, so don't get me wrong. And the imagery does suck me in, but I don't necessarily here's the thing. This is what it is. If I were to just take a card, particularly in the minors, if I just look at that card and say I didn't know anything else, right? And I just see that, I don't know that I'm going to get that, right? Compared to, say, and of course, this is the Black Violet Tarot. Right, so here, I don't need that number. I don't need this. I know what this is, right? I know what that is. I know what that is. Even, I'm trying to think what's close to me. Even something like, now this is Emma Poetica. You can still, well, this one, but I mean, you can still feel that energy. Now, these decks have the advantage of actually using the elemental representations, right? This deck does not, but that's not really the issue, right? I'm trying to think. I don't have anything else handy, but there are other decks that don't have these that I still get. Oh, you know what that could be? Here. Oh, this deck has it too, though. Looking at the Lonely Dreamer, because this is another one that is based on artwork. But Melissa Witherspoon did add in. But even without those, I feel like most of these, you would still get that feeling that you need. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this deck would be easier to read if it did have them. I think that some of the images just, it's kind of a stretch. You know, because, I mean, we do have elements here, you know, so it's not like we don't know what they are. You know, it does tell you, and it tells you the number. Yeah, I just think it's kind of a stretch for some of them. But I mean, oh, I love this. And the guidebook isn't super helpful in terms of creating a bridge between the choice of the image and the meaning. I think there was an attempt that was made, but I do love this deck. But I think it's a deck. I mean, look, there's so much there, and it's a bit smaller. And that's another reason I think why I probably wouldn't use it like with clients. Definitely not on Zoom, because it just doesn't. I think I'm doing the wrong. Because it would just, for me to do a real spread with it, it would have to be so far back, you know, to have room. And a lot of the finer details, I think, would be lost. And, you know, for me, when I'm reading for other people, I really want a deck that's going to help them connect with the cards and connect with the meanings. Because, you know, it's one thing for me to just tell them things, but if they can see it and feel it for themselves, I think it has so much more power. You know, you don't need to be able to read tarot to create that connection with the cards and to get that feeling. I don't think this would be a great deck for that. But I do think that it's a wonderful deck just to use for yourself. If the art appeals to you, I think that it can read beautifully. You just have to maybe put in the time. You know, there were some cards, not really those. There were some cards that at first I was like, oh, what is that supposed to be? Because, no. Like some of the pages and the knights, without seeing them together, it took me a minute. And even here, you know, at first, you know, I said, well, is this the king or the queen? Is she the queen? Is he the king? Right? And then if you can see, let me show you. From there. Oh, wait. Let's leave him there. Now, when you see them next to each other, I think it's very clear. But the problem is if they're not next to each other. Now, of course, these are different suits, but this is your queen, this is your king. And here it's fairly clear. But it's not always. But I mean, if you spend a little time. Now, that is the one thing the guidebook is good for, because it describes what's in the card. So if you were ever at a loss, you could check the guidebook for what you think it is. And the other thing is, we have knights and pages. Now, if you didn't see the knights, right? Say this was the first card you drew, and you didn't really flip through the deck, and you didn't. To me, I would see that and think, well, that must be the knight, right? Now, he's not on a horse or anything, but I mean, to me, that would be a knight. But of course, this is the page. And the knights have the horses, which makes sense, right? It makes sense. But, you know, pages didn't wear armor, so that kind of threw me. But again, when you see them with the knights, it makes sense. But if you're just flicking, it might not. Now, of course, if you pulled this first, you would probably say, oh, that must be the knight. And the guidebook doesn't tell you anything about symbols. Or, I don't think it does. So that's the only thing in terms of, because of course they are numbered and they do have the symbol. It's a nice deck and it feels nice and it shuffles nicely. I think that to me this deck feels very autumnal, and I think I will use it more in the next, say, month or so. But I like it, and I definitely think that it's worth a purchase if this art style appeals to you at all. I really love this one, and it keeps coming up. But yeah, I think it's really nice. But again, just those bigger spreads can be problematic for me, right? But maybe they wouldn't be for you. Maybe too. I think that there's almost a level of like sameness. I mean, obviously these are very different, right? But there's something too similar about them, and they kind of bleed into each other, I think, in a way that is not useful to me. So I think that's part of why using the oracle with it to break them up is helpful. But I do really like this deck. And the artwork is beautiful. I think this is a great deck if you're going to do like a single card draw, or even I would do 3, but much beyond that I probably not gonna do. I've tried it out a few times and it just didn't, it was harder to read. It was hard. I had to really focus on each card individually, and then to look at them as a whole. It's like I forgot what the individual cards were and had to kind of start again. Now, not with every card. Again, some of them I think are very clear and read very, very powerfully. And I think some of them can be very evocative, like this card. But others maybe not quite so much. Yeah, but I like this separation. Even just on the cloth, like keeping them a bit apart from each other makes it easier for me. Now, it may not be an issue for you. But yeah, I need that separation with this deck. But I like it. I really do like it. So I think it depends on how you read. And of course, whether or not the art style appeals to you. But I would say don't be afraid of it. If if it does appeal to you, and especially the size can be an issue, but it's not if you take time with the cards. Like, it's not like I have to squint to make things out. I don't have to strain. I just have to take time for my eyes to kind of distinguish the finer features. As opposed to just taking a glance and seeing what I need to see. Now, of course, like a card like this, yes, I can get this in a glance. But then, that one fairly well. Okay, here, it just depends on the card. And that's what it is. I think there's a big, the cards are very different, and I think some of them are better suited, and some of them jump out better than others, and other cards just require a little more study, a little more focus. But you know, if you wanted a deck to really kind of spend some quiet time with, maybe kind of considering your day and really kind of enjoying like some quiet time with your deck, I think this could be a fabulous deck for that, right? I think if you're in a hurry and you just want to do a quick reading, probably not the best deck. But I do like it. I really do like it. So yeah, and I mean the card stock is really nice. It shuffles beautifully. It's not super thick by any means, but it doesn't need to be. It's definitely very, very flexible. The cards feel very durable. And I'm going to have to edge it, and I think that will help too. It just, you know, tends to help me kind of bond with decks. Not always, but sometimes. And the funny thing is too, and then I'm going to wrap this up. The funny thing is, the more I use this deck, the more I appreciate it. So for me, this is a deck that takes a little time to get to know. Which most of my decks aren't like that. Most of my decks I read with really clearly and strongly right away. Not all, but the majority. But I think that it's worth the time to get to know. And yeah. So if the art style appeals to you, and if you want to take the time, I think it could be very rewarding and a very nice deck. And again, I cannot recommend enough pairing it, I'm just saying, with the wisdom of Hafiz. It's just, it brightens it up too. It's just, I don't know, it's just really nice with it. And I do think a lot of it has to do with the colors too, because this is so much brighter, and it just jumps out more. So yeah, I say if you're interested in this deck, maybe consider this one too, if you don't already have it. Yeah, so I mean, even this is a darker card, but I don't know, the objects are much more clear in this card, and it still has a bit of lightness and brightness to it, and it brightens this up as a result, at least for me. So look at that. Anyway, that is it. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let me know what you think. Do you have this deck? Do you want this deck? How do you read with it? So let me know, and until next time, just be wonderful to yourself. Be really, really wonderful, because you deserve the best. Only the best. All the best. And that is my wish for you.